A Labour MP, live on national television, cornered by a relentless journalist, squirming under the pressure of one simple question: should first cousins be allowed to marry? Instead of giving a straight answer, he dodged, stumbled, and repeated the same tired political lines, making himself and his party look weak and terrified of the truth. Why couldn't he just say what he really thought?
You're the first person ever to ask me the question.
OK, so answer it.
When the government's got a position of changing the law, I'll happily come back and talk to you about it.
But what do you think? Do you think first cousins should...
The interview that unfolded on live television was nothing short of excruciating. Labour Minister Pat McFadden found himself in an uncomfortable position as he faced a series of direct and pressing questions about his party's stance on first cousin marriages. Instead of providing a clear and straightforward response, McFadden struggled to find his footing, dodging the question at every turn. What could have been a moment to establish Labour's position turned into an embarrassing display of political tap dancing that left viewers frustrated and unimpressed.
Sorry, what position are you adopting on first cousins marrying?
Camilla Tominey, a seasoned journalist known for her sharp questioning, did not hold back. She confronted McFadden with a simple yet critical question. Does Labour support the legal ban on first cousin marriages in England and Wales? Instead of offering a clear answer, McFadden fumbled, hesitated, and tried to avoid committing to any particular stance.
Marrying. What position is Labour adopting on the issue of whether first cousins should marry in England and Wales? Should they or shouldn't they?
Tominey wasn't about to let him off the hook. She pressed him repeatedly, not just on Labour's position, but on his personal views as well. Should first cousins be allowed to marry? Was Labour going to block the proposed ban? These were yes or no questions, yet McFadden seemed completely unwilling to take a side. His refusal to give a straight answer only fueled the tension, making the entire exchange increasingly painful to watch.
Well, I'm not aware of our plans to change the current law at the moment on that question. If we are planning to change the law, and I promise I'll come back on your programme and talk to you.
Rather than addressing the question head-on, McFadden chose the safest and most uninspiring route, repeating Labour's official line that they had no plans to change the law. Over and over again, he dodged, sidestepped, and gave vague responses that did nothing to clarify Labour's position. The more he tried to dance around the issue, the worse it got.
Marrying, can they?
Well, I'm not aware of our plans to change the current law at the moment on that question. If we are planning to change the law, and I promise I'll come back.
At one point, Tominey bluntly asked whether he personally believed first cousin marriages should be allowed. Instead of taking the opportunity to express a personal opinion, McFadden simply defaulted to the party's non-committal stance. The hesitation, the nervous deflections, and the refusal to engage in a meaningful discussion made him appear weak and uncertain. The interview had all the hallmarks of a political disaster. Instead of showing leadership, or at least a firm grasp of the topic, McFadden came across as someone too afraid to say anything that might upset his party leader. It was a classic example of a politician trying so hard not to offend anyone that he ended up looking completely unconvincing.
Frankly, this should have been stamped out long ago, and essentially it had, but it's reared its head again in recent years, partly because of mass migration.
As expected, the internet wasted no time reacting. Viewers were quick to express their frustration, with many calling out McFadden's lack of courage and unwillingness to engage in an honest discussion. Social media platforms lit up with comments mocking his inability to take a stand, with some accusing him of being nothing more than a mouthpiece for Labour's leadership rather than a politician with independent thought. For many, this was yet another example of political spin taking precedence over honesty. Instead of treating the public like intelligent adults and offering a reasoned argument, McFadden's performance felt like a robotic recitation of party lines. His refusal to answer a simple question didn't just make him look bad, It made the entire Labour Party look like they were trying to avoid the issue altogether. The clip of the interview quickly went viral, spreading across news platforms and social media. It didn't take long for political commentators to jump on it, analysing Labour's reluctance to take a clear position and questioning why McFadden had been put forward if he wasn't prepared to answer difficult questions. The damage was done. Rather than controlling the narrative, Labour found themselves scrambling to manage the fallout from an interview that should have been routine, but ended up as an absolute PR nightmare.
South Asia. The reason the practice is so common is that ordinary people see family intermarriage overall as something that is very positive, something that helps build family bonds.
The issue of first cousin marriages has been a topic of debate in the UK for quite some time. Some people argue that it should be banned due to the increased risk of genetic disorders in children, while others believe that it is a personal choice that should not be interfered with. Regardless of opinions, the legal status of first cousin marriages in the UK is clear. It is completely legal. But the discussion goes beyond just the law. It touches on cultural traditions, religious practices, and ethical considerations, making it a complex and often heated subject.
First cousin marriages have been legal in this country since Henry VIII.
In England, Wales, and Scotland, first cousins are legally allowed to marry. No restrictions are preventing them from doing so, and the law does not consider these marriages to be incestuous. This might come as a surprise to some, especially given that certain parts of the world, including many US states, have put strict bans in place due to concerns over potential health risks for children born from such unions.
Apparently, it still does happen in a lot of different cultures. It's not something that's desirable. There are clear health problems that can persist and exist as a result.
While many countries have taken steps to outlaw first cousin marriages, the UK has remained unchanged on this issue. Some lawmakers and health professionals have pushed for reform, arguing that the risks associated with these marriages, especially when they are repeated over multiple generations, are too high to ignore. Others, however, believe that banning them would be an overreach of government power, interfering in people's personal lives and cultural traditions.
An estimated 35 to 50% of all sub-Saharan African populations either prefer or accept cousin marriages, and it is extremely common in the Middle East.
For many, first cousin marriages aren't just a matter of legality, they are deeply rooted in cultural and religious traditions. Among South Asian and Middle Eastern communities, marrying within the extended family is seen as a way to preserve wealth, maintain family ties, and strengthen social bonds. In some cultures, it is even considered a preferred form of marriage, with families encouraging such unions to keep their lineage strong and their assets within the family. But this practice isn't unique to these communities. Historically, European royal families also engaged in first cousin marriages to keep power and influence within their own bloodlines. Monarchs, aristocrats, and noble families frequently arranged marriages between cousins to prevent their wealth and territories from being divided among outsiders. Even famous historical figures, including Queen Victoria, married first cousins. Because of its deep cultural roots, the discussion about banning first cousin marriages isn't just about science and health. It also brings up questions about personal freedom, religious rights, and the government's role in deciding whom people can or cannot marry. Some argue that banning these marriages would unfairly target certain communities, while others believe that allowing them ignores the medical risks and the ethical concerns surrounding coerced or arranged marriages. This is why the topic remains so controversial. On one hand, there is undeniable scientific evidence showing that children of first cousin marriages are at a higher risk of genetic disorders. On the other hand, there's a long-standing tradition that many people believe should not be interfered with. The UK, at least for now, continues to allow these marriages, but with growing public debates and increasing political pressure, this might not always be the case.
Doubles the chances of all sorts of abnormalities and hearing loss, sight problems. It even increases the risk of sudden infant death syndrome.
One of the biggest concerns surrounding first cousin marriages is the increased risk of genetic disorders in children born from such unions. This is the main reason why some people, including politicians and health experts, are calling for a ban. While marriage is generally seen as a personal choice, the issue becomes more complicated when there is scientific evidence showing that these marriages can lead to serious health problems for future generations.
Having a baby with a first cousin more than doubles the risk of congenital problems such as heart and lung defects, cleft palates, and extra fingers, according to the largest study ever held in the UK.
When two people who are closely related have children, the chances of inherited genetic disorders increase significantly. This is because first cousins share about 12.5% of their DNA, meaning any harmful recessive genes they carry are more likely to be passed on to their children. The more closely related the parents, the higher the risk that their child could inherit 2 copies of a faulty gene, leading to conditions such as cystic fibrosis, sickle cell anemia, or developmental disorders. Scientific studies have backed up these concerns. The Born in Bradford study, one of the largest research projects on the topic, found that children born to first cousin parents had an 11% chance of birth defects, compared to just 2% in the general population. That's more than 5 times the normal risk. Researchers also found an increased likelihood of speech and learning difficulties in children from cousin marriages. These findings have fueled the argument that first cousin marriages shouldn't just be left as a cultural choice, but should be reconsidered as a public health issue. Some people may argue that many children born from cousin marriages are perfectly healthy, and that's true. But the problem isn't with individual cases, it's with the overall increased risks when these marriages are common within certain communities. If first cousin marriages happen repeatedly over multiple generations, the risks keep stacking up. This is why some countries, including parts of the US, have banned them altogether. The debate over banning first cousin marriages isn't just about science, it's also about personal freedom. Some people believe that the government should step in and outlaw the practice to protect future generations from unnecessary suffering. They argue that just like the law prevents parents from making harmful choices for their children, such as neglect or abuse, it should also prevent choices that significantly increase the risk of birth defects. On the other side of the argument, some people believe that banning first cousin marriages is too extreme. They argue that instead of criminalizing these marriages, a better approach would be to focus on education and genetic counseling. If people understand the risks involved and still choose to go ahead, it should be their decision. There's also the cultural aspect to consider. Many communities have practiced first cousin marriages for centuries, and banning them could be seen as discriminatory. For some, it's a deeply rooted tradition, and taking away the right to marry a cousin could feel like an attack on their culture and personal choices. This is why the debate is so complicated. On one hand, there is strong evidence showing that cousin marriages can lead to serious health risks for children. On the other hand, people don't want the government controlling their personal relationships. It's a tough balance between protecting public health and respecting personal freedom, and for now, the UK remains one of the countries that allows first cousin marriages. But with growing discussions and increasing political pressure, there could come a time when this law is reconsidered. The debate over first cousin marriages isn't just about science or ethics. It has also turned into a political battleground. Some politicians are pushing for a ban, arguing that the risks are too high to ignore, while others are choosing to stay silent, fearing the backlash from certain communities. The issue has become particularly uncomfortable for the Labour Party, which seems hesitant to take a clear stance, leading to accusations that they are prioritising political calculations over public health. Conservative MP Richard Holden has been one of the most vocal figures in pushing for a legal ban on first cousin marriages. He has made it clear that his concerns are based on public health and child welfare, rather than cultural or religious biases. His argument is simple. If scientific research has proven that first-cousin marriages lead to an increased risk of genetic disorders, why is the government still allowing it? Holden and his supporters believe that ignoring the issue means allowing avoidable suffering. He has compared it to other health-related regulations, like banning harmful substances or enforcing seatbelt laws, rules that exist to protect people, even if they limit personal choices. In his view, this isn't about singling out any specific community. It's about ensuring that children aren't born with preventable health problems due to outdated practices. His proposal has sparked a heated debate, with some praising him for taking a stand and others accusing him of targeting communities where first-cousin marriages are more common. Despite the backlash, Holden has remained firm in his position, arguing that the UK should follow the lead of other countries that have already banned the practice. While the Conservative MP has been outspoken on the issue, the Labour Party has been noticeably reluctant to engage in the conversation. Keir Starmer and his team have not made any moves to change the law, and when Labour politicians are asked about their position, they often dodge the question or give vague answers. This has led to frustration among those who believe the party should take a clear stance, whether for or against a ban. Critics argue that Labour's silence is politically motivated. They claim that Starmer is avoiding the topic because he doesn't want to alienate certain voter bases, particularly those in communities where first-cousin marriages are common. By refusing to take a position, Labour is accused of prioritising votes over ethics and public health. Even within the party, some privately acknowledge that the issue needs to be addressed, but they fear the backlash that could come from speaking out. Some Labour MPs may personally believe that first-cousin marriages should be banned or at least discouraged, but they are hesitant to push for change because they don't want to risk accusations of cultural insensitivity or discrimination. This reluctance was on full display during Pat McFadden's disastrous interview, where he repeatedly avoided answering a direct question about Labour's stance on first-cousin marriages. His refusal to engage in the discussion only added to the perception that Labour is unwilling to confront difficult but important issues. For now, Labour seems to be hoping that the controversy will die down without them having to take a firm stance. But as the debate continues to gain attention, their strategy of avoiding the conversation might not work forever. With growing public pressure and media scrutiny, Labour may eventually have to face the issue head-on. If they continue to sit on the fence, they risk being seen as a party that is too afraid to take a stand, even when it comes to the health and well-being of future generations. Political interviews can either strengthen a party's image or completely derail it. This one did the latter. When Labour Minister Pat McFadden sat down for a live interview, he had a chance to clarify his party's stance on a controversial issue. Instead, he did the exact opposite. His refusal to give a clear answer only made Labour look weak, indecisive, and afraid to engage in an honest discussion. If anything, it made the public trust them even less. One of the worst things a politician can do in an interview is appear unsure or unwilling to stand by a decision. That's exactly what happened with McFadden. His failure to answer a simple question, whether Labour supports or opposes banning first-cousin marriages, made the entire party look like they were dodging the issue. Instead of showing leadership and offering a strong argument, he danced around the question, repeating the same non-committal lines over and over. This kind of response does nothing but frustrate people. Critics have pointed out that politicians are elected to make difficult decisions, not avoid them. If Labour can't take a clear position on an issue like this, what does that say about their leadership? Are they making decisions based on what's right? Or are they too scared to say anything that might upset certain voter groups? These are the kinds of questions the public is now asking. What made it worse was the fact that McFadden wasn't even being asked to introduce a new policy. He was simply being asked for Labour's stance. If the party had a well thought out position, all he had to do was explain it. Instead, He made it painfully obvious that Labour either hasn't decided where it stands or is deliberately avoiding the conversation. Either way, it didn't look good. A big reason why this interview became such a disaster for Labour was because of Camilla Tominey. She wasn't willing to let McFadden off the hook with vague political answers. Every time he tried to deflect, she pushed back. Every time he tried to dodge the question, she repeated it. This relentless questioning exposed the fact that Labour had no clear stance, or if they did, they weren't willing to say it out loud. This kind of journalism is what holds politicians accountable. Tominey's questioning forced Labour into an uncomfortable position, making it clear that they couldn't just ignore the topic and hope it would go away. The clip of the interview spread quickly, leading to public debates, media scrutiny, and even criticism from within the party. What could have been a small discussion turned into a national conversation, all because one journalist refused to accept political spin as an answer. Labour now finds itself in damage control mode. Instead of looking like a strong, decisive party, they have been painted as one that avoids difficult conversations. The real problem isn't even whether they support or oppose a ban on first cousin marriages. It's that they don't seem to know how to address important topics without sounding like they're just trying to keep everyone happy. This interview wasn't just embarrassing for McFadden, it was a wake-up call for Labour. If they don't start answering tough questions with confidence and clarity, they risk losing credibility with voters. People don't want leaders who tiptoe around issues. They want leaders who stand by their decisions and explain them with conviction. If Labour can't do that, they will continue to struggle in the public eye. So, what are your thoughts on this? Let us know in the comments below.